This is Everyday Expertise, and I'm Angela, and I'm here today with Tyler Edlin. He's a freelance illustrator and concept artist. He also offers courses and mentorship to other artists. Hello!
Thank you for having me on. I sincerely appreciate it.
Thank you for coming. So, how did you get started in art?
Well, I was like, I think a lot of people, I was in high school for a while and I dabbled in it in high school. I took the basic art courses that at least my school in New England offered.
Mhm.
And it was just like, okay, we had block scheduling at the time. So that means we only had like 4 classes a day throughout high school. And I know I think probably the norm is maybe somewhere upwards of 6 or 7.
Mm.
With the art classes, I basically had half the day to do art in high school. It just took up 2 different blocks because I think I usually 1 or 2 different art classes, and that kind of kept me at least by senior year out of a lot of more of the math or the science based courses. Which were fine and great, but they're definitely like a lot of work and exhausting. So I found myself often skipping half the school days. And because the schedules would rotate. So I'd be doing art all morning or art all afternoon. And I would definitely notice I'd be sneaking in or out of school to kind of go toward that. So I had a budding interest at then, but even at that point, I was very average in the class. There was people
Mhm.
that were far far better than me, but I enjoyed it enough, and I kind of occasionally stuck with it until graduation. And then my mom, I kind of got pressure from them. They're very old fashioned. They're like, you got to figure out a plan, or you got to do something. They were always advocating almost heavy handedly to go to college. Like they kind of instilled on me that that was like the only option, no matter what. They didn't care what I did, but they're
Mhm.
like, you go to college after high school, like that's your job. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I was just rolling with it. I didn't know any better, and so I enrolled at a fairly local art college, in the area. I commuted, so I didn't have to pay, room and board and things like that. So it was like 40 minutes, a 40-minute drive. I just did that every day, which wasn't bad, but it still was a very expensive school, and I didn't know what to get into. So it was a liberal arts program, so they kind of had us take. I was taking basic Spanish classes again, maths and science, and then loading up in on the arts. So like, okay, like this is a really old fashioned school too. Like, so we were, and I think it was even partly religious. So they weren't even like diving into some of the deeper ends that you can get out of art. But I was like,
Mhm.
okay, we're drawing still lifes every day. We're going out on location, in areas where we're doing paintings, various paintings like watercolors and like oils. And I just, kind of found myself being like a young guy at the time. I was just kind of rolling with it. I never did, more than was expected of me. I
Mhm.
I I never not did something. So I was always, doing diligent work, but nothing more, nothing extraordinary along those lines. I did like a serviceable. I usually range in the B plus to like the low A's. I did what I could. But yeah, it was a weird time. I was kind of busy with mentally, of course, with other things like lot of dating, a lot of socializing with other people, a
Mhm.
little bit of partying, nothing crazy. But that's kind of, I think, a great age for that. When you're like 19, 20 years old. I think that's like a really good time to let loose and
Mm.
get that out of your system. A lot of people, some people can work, or artists can work through that and are super trained and focused. I've never been that type of artist. So my mind always gets pulled. If there's a distraction in tow, like I'm gonna go to it, and that's
Mhm.
how it was even earlier than high school. I never would sit down and draw, all afternoon or anything like that. I occasionally did the occasional fan art for one of my favorite video games or something like that, but I wasn't really just copying someone else. Like I would get the games used to have instruction manuals or strategy books, and I used to love getting those things. They had lots of cool pictures in them. I just there just draw from the pictures. It was just
Mm.
copying, shameless copying, but that to the extent what I was interested in, and nothing
Well,
really more.
I think that's how a lot of people start, right? It's just
Yeah.
copying, and then they develop their own style.
But it's insane, yeah, how and talented I see some young people that I'd be able to do that, but like even on a much further level, I could adequately just copy what was in front of me. So it's like, okay, I have
Mhm.
a kind of like that base kind of foundational skill set, like an aptitude, I guess. I had an
Mm.
aptitude for it, but again, it was really nothing else. I didn't know, like if someone told me to draw a character or a scene from scratch, I wouldn't have known how to do it very well.
Mhm.
because I just didn't have the training for that. But yeah, that's why in at least in the younger years with art, they set you up. You're painting this, in front of you, or they arrange all the objects, set up a still life, right, a classic still life, and you draw or paint from that.
That's
And
great.
that's of course the best way. That way, that someone like a lot of young artists, they where they're not trained in a lot of structural things, they can just at least replicate. And I think that's a huge
Mhm.
part, right? To get going, you have to be able to replicate to some sort of degree what's in front of you. And so that's largely what I did over, and over again. And I was like, okay, I don't know if art ever got any more interesting than that. So this was like,
Mm.
this is like early 2000s, like almost 20 years ago at this point, that I didn't know that you could do work and get paid anyways to draw get video game art. Or I
Mhm.
never even thought that art was even in like movies. It was just like back then it was a different time. And I really wasn't, I think, until about the Star Wars prequel movies kind of
Mm.
concluded at the end of the 1990s. I think maybe early 2000s. The third one
Yeah.
finally had come out, and then they started releasing the art of books. And I'm
Mm.
looking through it, and there's these works by, Ryan Church and a couple of other guys, Dylan Cole, and I'm
Mhm.
like, oh my goodness, I was just floored by like, oh God, I wanted to do it, but I didn't. I had no skill set, so I'd enroll in night courses at a local art museum on the side.
Mm.
Additionally from the college stuff I was doing, because again, it was just basic, you drawing one, drawing two, maybe oils one,
Mhm.
nothing like that kind of did an industry kind of special course until I looked in a flyer at a museum. They're like, you fantasy art drawing class or something like that. I was like, okay, that
Mm.
sounds way more, my deal. So I tried that out,
Yeah.
and yeah, it was just more of like a huge time of experimentation. Just
Mhm.
okay, here's a couple other like-minded people, which is always great. The first time you're in a room with some you always feel like I always felt, at least back then, as the outcast. I really like just drawing like these really nerdy sort of game characters and monsters and stuff like
Mm.
that. And at least back in the 90s, it's like you were, that's like a big bullseye, on you
Mhm.
back then when you're into that stuff. But now I know it's a completely different story, which is great. I think it's great for people like people like us and me.
Mhm.
It's so like the tides really have turned to kind of favor those sort of creative people and interests. So yeah, that's great. But I was really just doing a lot of like, it was either pen and ink back then. I started, I think, to dabble into Photoshop because I think I read in one of those art of Star Wars books they were using. I didn't know how they painted them. I was like, that doesn't look like painting. That doesn't look like watercolor. What did they paint that with? And I think that the teacher's like, no, they painted that on the computer. I was like, blew my mind. Like, what, you can paint? And
Mm.
even some of my people, my peers at the time, of course, it was like, oh yeah, you can go to like Microsoft Paint, or you can use a mouse and keyboard. You can paint the pictures this way, and this is what they do. They do their drawing, they scan it in, right, and they use the selection tools and they fill it in and do some basic kind of, I guess, anime style of
Yeah.
fading. But I wasn't even on that level. I was like, I had no idea that's how they did it. And I
Mm.
always I always saw it, and until things finally clicking in my rather slow moving head
Mhm.
that this may be something I could
Yeah.
sorry, potentially do.
Mhm.
And finally I got like a basic starter tablet, like one of those little 4 by 6 inch ones, very tiny. And I started to doodle it and get to familiar with Photoshop. That was the biggest learning, I think, hurdle of my life, because it was, it was Photoshop. And we never had a computer growing up or anything like that, which was
Mm.
half the trouble. Because like, we didn't have internet, we weren't online, so
Mm.
it was a very analog sort of
Yeah.
time period, and I just wasn't exposed to a lot of that. Occasionally, a friend, that was in the know would have something really fancy, but honestly, it would go over my head. So I think by 2005 or six, I sat in front of a computer. I tried to draw on a computer for the first time, and I was like, "Ooh, that's kind of like a video game." It felt natural, but at the same time, it still was very like I had no idea. Our art skill wise, it was still like I'm trying to build and create
Mhm.
fantasy worlds because that's what I liked. And I'm trying to build these massive ideas that I had in my head, and I still just lacked really the design know how and a lot of the advanced sort of fundamentals that would require to execute that with any kind of confidence. Yeah,
Mhm.
I could still just copy what's in front of me like that. That never left, but it requires a very and a much deeper understanding of those fundamentals to be able to really put together pieces to build things that don't look, absolutely amateurish. And so
Mhm.
the competency was just too low. So, and I got frustrated. I was trying to color and stuff, but I needed more experience. So I kind of put the computer, down for a bit and, filled another year or so of just traditional painting, just oils
Mm.
and watercolors and some pen and ink stuff. And I think I was doing that till 2007, and then I
Mhm.
went back to the computer. I think about 2007 and 8,
Yeah.
and that's where I started trying to put all these things together. And it was an ugly time for me. Like this work was brutal because it was just me trying to take everything I just crammed in for like 3 or 4 years and trying to do
Mhm.
something with it. I kind of honestly wish I had saved more of that work. There was a
Mm.
point, like once I got through that hurdle, maybe in 2010 and 11, and I was like switching computers. I'm cutting files left and right. I'm like, I don't want to see those again. They didn't make the cut. So I unfortunately I don't have a record of most of that stuff. But I mean, yeah, it was a tough learning time, but yeah, I think I was finally really getting going by 2010, and I was
Mm.
doing local game art jobs and things like that. And then the rest, as they say, is history. I just think one little
Mhm.
thing kind of trickled and snowballed out from
Mhm.
there. And the competency, the familiarity, and of course the interest has just been getting better. Eventually there was this magazine. I think it's still around called Imagine FX. It's a British magazine,
Mm.
but they used to be quite expensive importing them to the States. But
Oh,
oh,
yeah.
that was the best day of the month. Like I used to love getting those things, and I would read every word, cover to
Mhm.
cover. I'd look up every artist in there. I'd cut their little thing out. I'd put them in a little file. Like I got to keep an eye on this person. I was like really just into the culture. I tried to. I
Mm.
got into the magazine a few times. They eventually ultimately had me. They hired me for a few articles too. But that was like my dream. Like I need to get into this
Mm.
magazine. This is the big deal. So
Yeah, I think I remember that. It's too bad a lot of these magazines they're not really around, you know? There used to be,
uh,
like, this huge thing of art magazines and
yep,
cinematography magazines and writings magazines, and a lot of them are just gone,
I
or
miss.
they've gone online or
Yeah,
something.
they're all online nowadays to
It's
some
just n
compact.
the
But
same experience, you know?
I used to be a huge magazine person. I'd
Mhm.
buy them all. And I soak them up. I get the video game ones, the art ones, and I loved like looking at it. And it's a little more of an attachment thing compared to like just looking at something on a screen, flicking it away. Okay,
Mhm.
if I even remembered any of that, there's a whole other story because chances are I'm not even going to open that web page ever again unless I like take a screenshot of it and really set it aside. So information, I think we're as a whole, as a culture, like we're absorbing a lot more information, a lot more of it cycling through. But by God, I'll be the first to admit, not even a quarter of that is sticking like it used to if I just would physically soak that up, in a sense, from a magazine where I'd look at it again and again. I'd bookmark things. Maybe, I don't know, maybe my diligence with that used to be a little more,
Yeah.
careful. But yeah, media today, you know how it is.
Mhm.
It's just,
Yeah, it's all
it's
very
so everything's
fast.
quick, everything's too
Yeah,
quick.
I agree. So, then basically, I guess your medium right now is digital art.
Yes.
What software are you using currently?
Right, right now, for painting, it's 100% Photoshop. And that's
Mhm.
kind of how it's been for 10 years straight. Now, I've heard recently so many great things about Clip Studio Paint. A lot of my
Mm.
favorite guys are trying it out and they're loving it. So that is actually it's on my schedule. It's on my to-do list this week. I'm going to go get Clip Studio Paint and try to put the finishing touches on probably like an existing painting on it and just to kind of get my feet wet on that. So that's what I'm going to be testing out.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it has the advantage of cost, right? Over
Mhm.
Photoshop. It's a one-time purchase pretty
Yeah,
much, and,
very cheap, very cheap.
yeah, especially if you get it on a sale, it can be quite cheap. But yeah. Huh.
So I'm looking for. I always keep it simple.
Mhm.
With drawing. I knew it took me forever to learn Photoshop. I wasn't going to let it go that easily because it's what I know.
Mhm.
I more or less in and out, and it's a comfort thing. So I'm comfortable in that digital space. Now, if well, talking about softwares, the 3D side of thing is a whole other situation that I've been trying to come to terms with lately. A lot of younger people, a lot of my
Mhm.
contemporaries are getting really, really good. and really, really quick with the 3D. And it's
Mm.
really awesome. It's inspired. But like I'm growing up not being a technical person, if I'm
Mhm.
in a 3D software, which is a little bit more cumbersome than Photoshop is, I
Mhm.
get frustrated really quickly. And I'm posting on Facebook like 2 to 3 times a session. Hey, this program's not doing this. I need help from somebody. Like just waiting for the the mercy of the
Mhm.
internet to someone kind of answer my plea because like I get lost and
Yeah.
turned around in a software rather quickly. But I have been diving into Blender because that's also free. And it's amazing.
Mhm.
It really does, especially with the plugins they have these days. Professionals are doing amazing work.
Mm.
Like oh my gosh, yeah, I'm really just floored by it. Like oh, you got one set of people that do at least in the two for 3D for 2D people. The 2D people
Mhm.
can do amazing photoreal stuff with it now. But I found like a couple people on YouTube that do like animated Ghibli style backgrounds
Mm.
entirely in Blender, and I'm like, okay, now that's something that kind of caught my interest because I like painting with like a little bit more of that style, and the 3D always was very opposite of that. It always looked stiff, it
Mm.
looked rigid, and it could get you very realistic results very quickly. But I like the animated stuff, so learning that okay, I can program Blender to get me really animated looking grass, water, trees, and clouds and stuff. That will allow me at this point if I need to do either like blockouts for a scene or just want to do iterations on an idea
Mhm.
like okay I can model out a stick in a tube or a square make a mock-up castle, drop in the lighting and all the other looking environmental pieces, adjust the sun direction, everything, and but now I can move the camera around in real time and get like okay this is a shot, okay up here that's a shot, this, and get like 4 to 5 paintings really quickly just doing a little
Mm.
bit of a paint over what
Mm.
Blender provides. So that's the value in that is it'll even if I'm going to paint over it, it's still going to increase my speed if I can get through the 3D side
Mhm.
really quickly. And then the other thing I've been trying software wise, I got a an Oculus Quest, which is
Mm.
a completely wireless VR headset. I guess it's kind of more on the budget one. It's definitely on the lower price range, but I got it, and
Right.
I have one art app in it called Gravity Sketch, and it's really fun. It's very natural. I was again insanely surprised with how natural it is to just build something almost like with your hands. You have two separate independent controllers, and it's like
Mhm.
you're drawing, you're moving, you're sculpting. You control your movement in the space by gestures, hand gestures. So I'm like orienting my hands like this and like this. You feel like Tom Cruise in Minority Report, but it's so intuitive. Like if I need to get closer to my scene, it's just like if I need farther away, or if I need to rotate it, it's like locking my hands and going like this. It's so fast and fun. Whereas like and again in Blender or any other 3D software,
Mhm.
I'm using the mouse. I'm trying to find where my cursor is in this 3D space on the computer, which
Mhm.
it never knows half the time. Usually like I put an object somewhere and I think it's here, but it's like really like a mile in the background. It's like way, and I'm like, oh gosh, and
Mm.
I'm wrestling with the UI constantly. So
Mm.
I want my goal is to bridge um, a new workflow that can you at least for complex scenes. I can maybe start in the VR, export to Blender, and then export from Blender to Photoshop. So I'll have a little bit of a pipeline. But for experimental stuff like
Yeah.
that, it's really fun. I was building a windmill with it. I was building all kinds of
Mhm.
little towers, and there's painting does take a while. A lot of you guys probably know, and drawing
Mm.
is just as slow in most cases. There is a satisfaction that I never knew before of like creating something in 3D that in a VR space that's right in front of me, that you can get results in 3 dimensions
Mhm.
so quickly, and it's just like so gratifying. It's like oh my god, like I can actually see how this can potentially work or function now, that it
Mhm.
would take just a lot of drawing or a lot of painting on a 2D side of things to really articulate the same thing.
Mm.
So it's really been inspiring, but again I haven't had the time to really like do a lot with it. I did a few basic projects, and there's a lot I want to learn, with
Mm.
that. But it's going to for me learning new software to a point where I can actually use it in a project to the point where it won't slow me down, because if I'm not that familiar with it, you can't keep the speed of momentum that you
Yeah, of
need.
course.
So I have to log in a lot of those practice hours just to be familiar
Mm,
with it, and that's kind of what I'm more doing in my on the back end right now, is just getting familiar with the tools
mm.
and what their potential is.
It's crazy though what technology can do for art. Yeah.
Really, really creative. It's definitely going to be, at least on the concept side of things, it's
Mhm.
definitely the future. There's just an unparalleled amount of information and speed that you can get for like physically building out a set
Mm,
or a scene, that I can actually walk in and really get a sense of the scale and the placement of things. And then of course just exporting it, like VR is not at a point right now where it can make it look super pretty, but that's what the other 3D software is for. But
mm,
yeah, like that's definitely where things will be headed in the next 10 years, for
mm.
sure. For sure.
Yeah. So, well, you talked about how video games influence a lot of your early art. What or who would you say are your major influences?
There's a lot of things I've again, I didn't really grow up with anime and stuff, but I love the Studio Ghibli movies. I love a lot of the good 90s stuff like Ghost in the Shell, the Ninja
Hmm.
Scrolls, the Evangelion. I love that stuff, and that there's just such a 90s sort of grit with those, that
Hmm.
growing up in that era really have stuck with me. And then,
Mm,
artist wise, there's just a ton. On like something like Instagram and stuff. There's like guys like Ryan Lang, and who else? He's the first one. Oh, Jake Pinion, and loads of people like Feng Zhu. I still really love his stuff, and yeah, there's just a lot of, depending on where my head is on a particular time, it I tend to shift focuses quite
mm,
a bit, because like for work I'll do more realistic 3D stuff, but like if I'm in my own space and I really love just like painting, then it's the animation, like the Dice Tsumi art,
mhm,
any of the guys that worked on the movie Klaus, that animation from Netflix last
mm.
year. Like I love all those guys. I can't they haven't been with me long enough that I can just rattle them off on a call like this, but like I could know them in a set or their names. But like yeah, I love their stuff. Like a Gabriel Gomez, love his stuff. If it's very colorful, in a very controlled way. I'm not an asseter, but I love colorful art. I love animation stuff. I love stuff with
Mhm,
lots of deep texture and things. So yeah, there's like a lot of artists that I'm just like my eyes are going to left and right
mhm.
all the time. And yeah, Instagram, I got a problem where I'm just glued to that, just constantly scrolling, looking for the next big piece, essentially.
Well, there's so much to see.
Yes, there is.
Yeah. Um, your work, from what I've noticed, is really beautiful.
Thank you very much.
It's like this a lot of you have a lot of this very sort of detailed environment art. What about this genre appeals to you?
Well, I love the character stuff, but for me, they're a little more stressful, because there's a much lower margin of error when
Hmm.
getting up close to do something like a portrait. If you subtly misplace a line, you'll add 10 years to a person, or you'll
Mm,
change their entire expression. So
mm,
it's like, for me to get to do that well, I'm in a little bit of a different headspace. So I have to like really kind of focus and concentrate more. I never got, I'd say, proficient enough for that level of illustration where it flows. It never flowed super easy for me. Like if I did it, or when I do it, I have to be in a nice headspace where I'm focused. And so the more like the environment design stuff came
mm,
at the tail end of college, when they kept telling me your figures they need a lot of work. Like okay, I didn't understand why at the time, but I was getting work sooner than later, just doing the
mhm,
environment stuff. And because it's a lot, in a sense, there's a need for more of it when it
mhm,
comes to game art and stuff. There's a much it's far less competitive than the
mm,
character space. So that's where I got my start, and that's therefore built a lot of my work up. Um, I didn't get hired for any kind of character thing until years later. But yeah, so I kind of just and I think that's the key word to go. I
mhm,
naturally fell into it and developed. over time a greater or a really nice appreciation to it, that it kind of helped me find that
Mhm.
niche, that it's not just like there's a lot of flavor or a lot of style of environment design, but I definitely like that kind of that art that I guess would entice like escapism in somebody. Like
Mm.
I want to create this place that I can leave the stresses of every day, behind, and just chill there. And that
Mm.
it's a place I want to explore in a game. They're all places I'd love to see a set on a movie. So I just kind of create places that I personally want to see, and hope someone else would also want to kind of chill out or wonder, start to wonder about a place like that as well.
Mm. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, so yeah, it was just like a weird little thing I fell into, and just over time I was like, okay, I'm getting this is where I can make my money and get recognition from here. So I just lean into that
Mhm.
and try not to go against the grain too much, because when I do post the character stuff, it's like they're fine on a technical side, but they people really do, I think, come for seeing a new me put up a new environment and a new world to kind of sell them on.
Mm. So this show's very much about process. Can you walk me through your process, say from idea to a finished piece?
Yeah, it very spontaneous. I usually have the idea for several pieces going at once or in my head
Mhm.
going, and when I'm finally like I'm rather impulsive. As soon as just like one is in my head, I'm gonna put down, even if I don't finish it, what else I got going on. I'm gonna start up the new one, at least get that rolling for maybe a day or two, and then
Mhm.
if something else catches my mind, I'll do it. So I basically every year I have this massive folder of things I keep intending to finish, and that I kind of have a load of images started at different stages.
Mm.
So based off whatever class or person I'm teaching, I will kind of occasionally whip those out of the drawer and work on them to demonstrate a particular technique or some kind of fundamental that I would
Mhm.
need to get through to the next stage of that. And that's the beauty of them all being at different stages. There's something I can actively show somebody something else on the technical side at every turn. But yeah, they usually start with a drawing, and not a good drawing. I try to just break down my end result, right, is always painting. It's always color. So
Mhm.
my actual line art, the drawing itself, is never part of the final product. So I try not to waste as much time, or try to not to waste any time at all on that part. I
Okay.
literally just use it as a plan to kind of execute the rest of the image. So
Mhm.
and they're all over my ArtStation. When I try to post my process there as often as I can, and they're colorful. I'm using pinks. I'm using purples. I just switch
Mhm.
colors just because I think they're going to get too messy if I stay with one color. And I'm like, okay, this part or this shape is that color, and it's just my mind trying to like sort out the scene from an abstract sense, looking at the shapes and basically any kind of principle of design. I'm looking for patterns. I'm looking for the movement without getting attached to the idea, and of course without
Mhm.
diving into detail whatsoever. I need to see
Mhm.
structurally how this is going to play out without like really seeing the whole thing to completion. I'm one of those people, I never can really see an image in my head before it's done. I just
Mm.
build a good foundation, and hopefully it'll work up from there. But yeah, just really quick drawing, and then I usually nowadays will skip. A lot of digital artists or a lot of painters like to go with a value first, where they just do a black and white painting, and then
Okay.
maybe they'll add color or do like I usually just skip that more so nowadays because I'm familiar or comfortable enough with the value side that I'll just jump into the color, because again that's my final result. I'm trying to take the
Mhm.
shortest line, to the end, and I'll just usually just the same way I worked years in oils and stuff is in acrylics is
Mhm.
just background to foreground, big shapes to small
Mm.
shapes.
Mm.
That's always worked. It's worked traditionally. It works digitally. So I try to figure out the biggest pieces first. That way you can block out a painting in 30 minutes to an hour. Even
Mm.
the most complex images, you can if you can't block it out, in that short of time, then there's something structurally wrong. Like that is you're really miss sorting out like your priorities with the image, because
Mhm.
any good designer can break it, even the most complex scene or part of life, wherever you are, they can boil it down to very few values, very few shapes, and still have the design read and still have the image work. So that's what
Hmm.
I've been trying to really do, because honestly, they never even taught me that at art school. That like that's kind of like, I paid them all this money, and that's it. You got to look at this detail, or you got to look at this. No, it's all about looking at it from, being able to simplify. The art of simplifying is really the hard thing that they never taught us, and
Hmm.
that's been my life lesson of the last 10 years, is trying to be able to do that. Because like I said, like even with no art training, I could sit there and detail for detail copy what's in front of me. The challenge is being able to simplify that. So saying more with less. Make a
Mm.
statement, but not get into needless detail, texture, and things like that. So yeah, it's always the same process. I do the first the lines to figure out the movement. Then I go with the shapes. How do those lines connect? Then
Mhm.
I try to figure out how the shapes of light or shadow will play off each other, much
Mhm.
like classical illustrators like Tom Lovell,
Mm.
or Isaac Levi, would do. And
Yeah.
then I go into basic colors. And then once the shapes and the forms read with color and light, then I will worry about, do the textures look like they need to look at? And
Mm.
that usually transitions right into the detailing side of
Hmm.
things. It's just getting it very like simple. I try to keep it simple as long as I can. And then like that last 80% ends up taking like longer, than that whole, or the last 20% takes a lot longer to do than the entire 80% leading up to that, rather.
Mm. Are you using a tablet or are you using just your mouse?
Yeah. Oh God, no, I've
Okay.
never drawn or painted with a mouse. I could again. When I was see people talk or reference that in those early days, I was like, I don't think I could paint with that. It never. That's nothing I never tackled, and occasionally that does come up in a Discord server or two
Mhm.
nowadays. But yeah, I use a which goes from camera like about here to here. It's
Mhm.
27-inch Wacom Intuos Touch. So
Mm.
I don't use the touch features. I think every time I'm trying to draw on the screen here like this, it activates something that I get frustrated with. It'll change the size, the magnification, or
Yeah.
some tool, and I go crazy with it because like my hands all over the thing. I don't know the gestures enough to work. So I
Mhm.
actually I think the touch one's more expensive. Don't use any of the touch ones. So I kind of paid a little more in the end anyway. But yeah, I love it. But I use the basic what's it, like the old Wacom medium tablet, maybe about 10 inches. It was
Mhm.
old gray. It was like a strong car from like the 50s. I beat on that thing for like 10 years. Never had a problem with it. It was wired. It was one of those old gray waddles. I think it was in 203.
Mm.
I just retired it. I probably could have got another 10 years out of that thing, but I finally got a deal on a tablet screen, and I was sold on that. I was like, my drawing started to get better, my speed started to get better,
Mhm.
and I do. It wasn't the 10 years of experience leading up to that, but having a big space where I can actually get a little more movement, with my hand, and see a
Mhm.
little bit more detail in the work. That actually did help from a tool side of things.
Hmm.
But now there's
Yeah.
all kinds of models like XP Pen. I got a pile of them. They keep sending me over here. The Deco Medium. Like there's a lot of brands now that offer
Yeah.
very cheaper alternatives to these,
No,
and
that's
I
true.
hear all good things
Mm.
about them all. So they
Yeah.
got an entry model for everybody.
Yeah, I think I just bought like a Huon,
Hmm.
and that was like I got it on special on Amazon and it was like $89.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
they're super affordable these days,
Yeah.
which is fantastic.
Do you do a lot of layers when you're painting?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm not. Okay, so I'm not a layer guy, but
Mhm.
if the scene is actually pretty complex. I like to keep like the history of what I did. So I'll leave the layer, and especially if I'm painting with a specific shape or like a
Mhm.
character or a tree on a layer that I need to get, I will leave that layer intact so you can command or control click it to get the selection of it, which
Mm.
allows me to keep really clean edges and shapes throughout the entire painting. So
Yeah.
often what I do is there's a shortcut. I don't even know what it is. I have to literally look at my keyboard because it's ingrained into me. But it's like Shift Alt Command and then like E but it
Mhm.
copies the whole painting on top of
Oh
itself
yeah.
to the top of the layer stack. So I'm really only
Hmm.
kind of painting on one layer, but
Mhm.
I constantly will just keep anything big that I add
Mhm.
under it, that I just as like a history, I guess, so I can see. So sometimes the images will get up to like 50 layers or something, but most of the time, if it's like a very quick illustration,
Mhm.
it'll probably be no more than 10. I try to keep it simple.
Mm. Oh, that makes sense.
But they have gone up to well over 100 on some of the more complex scenes. That if I use photo textures, yeah, if I'm using an actual photo texture to fill out a scene, yeah, like
Mhm.
if I'm especially if I'm using a lot of them, they'll all have their
Mhm.
own. You got to keep the layers with that most of the time. So those are if my scene looks complex, it does have a lot of layers.
Mm. Oh, that's pretty cool. I always find that very fascinating. Like you have digital artists talking about like, oh, I have like 100, 200 layers in in this picture, and I'm like, I don't even understand how that works, but it sounds cool.
You spend a lot of time going through them is what you do. So
Yeah.
if I'm trying to keep my speed up, I got to keep it
Mhm.
down to like less than 10.
Yeah.
Because yeah, it's just you'll notice you're just like, okay, where's this layer? Especially if you're sloppy like me and not naming them, which I don't. I won't take the time to name every little layer. That's adding more time, right? If you're adding
Mm.
you're adding time shuffling layers, naming layers, organizing layers, putting them into folders. That's just like time I should be spending painting. So I do try to just keep it simple, merging up and continue to work on the top of the stack only. I hate to, once I'm at 50 or 25, ruffling through the layer. Oh, it can drive you crazy.
Yeah, I imagine. Okay, so you offer courses and mentorship. How did you get into that, and what do your classes usually involve?
Well, I started doing that 5 years ago after I traveled out to California. It was one of
Mm.
the conventions. I can't even remember the name of it, but this art school that was over there at the time was they had a booth and stuff, and of course they're there to sell programs to students. But I was there because I think I did YouTube at that point for 5 years.
Mhm.
And I don't think I made a dime off it. In that time, I never really thought of it as like a very formal thing. It was something I just did for fun on the side. But I was talking with them, and somewhere it came. I think I had a colleague that was working there. It's like, you guys need any more instructors? I got some openings in my schedule, and I just sent them to my YouTube channel. I was like, look, I do this. I do create content. I like and kind of teaching in a sense. And
Mm.
like, okay, that got the conversation started enough that I started teaching with the Computer Graphics Master Academy. Now this is my fifth year,
Mhm.
and then that just started. I liked it a lot. So then more and more people started like, hey, I really like your stuff. What else do you offer? Or they just start coming to me. And I'm like, okay, let me set this up. So I did it off the books. Like I wasn't
Mhm.
I didn't advertise it for 3 or 4 years before I actually there's evidence online of that.
Mhm.
I did it years before. I just never advertised it because I didn't think there was like enough of a thing, or I didn't. I don't know. I was hesitant about it. I don't,
Mm.
and the imposter syndrome maybe what it is. I never really felt qualified to, but people kept asking, so it's like, okay, there is a demand for this thing. And then I think 1 or maybe 3 years now, I made it a much more official site where I did
Mhm.
that on the side now, and um, yeah, just try to fill it up. And there's not a lot of offerings out there. I think this is what separates it for just one-on-one coaching.
Mm.
It's very easy to find an art class
Yeah.
online, and it's very easy to find a course, a self-paced course. There's there's a million of those online, but there's very few people out there that will actually work with most level skill artists on a one-on-one basis and set up that time and make that work. And so
Mhm.
that's probably why I'm constantly filling up the schedule with that, because there is not a lot of there's not a lot of competition, honestly. A lot of people will do a mentorship, but again, it will be in groups. So
Mhm.
there's I think there's a comfort in a course, just maybe like an ease of stress with just working one on one, that I think some artists particularly just favor or need. And maybe they get intimidated with the class structure or stress from that.
Mm.
So everything I literally like a physical trainer, but for art. They pay X amount of sessions up front, and they can cash those in whenever they want. For
Mm.
some people, they like the structure of like, let's meet every week. So okay, we're going to set that up. We'll meet once a week. Some people like biweekly. Some people I literally hear from once every 3 months, and they're like, "Hey,
Mm,
I did this. Can we meet?" Like, okay, let me figure out a whole into my schedule. So yeah, there is something for everybody. With the starting the Patreon at the start of the year allowed me to offer people content a at a much lower price range, and then b it gave them access to stuff while they were waiting in line to
mm,
take a mentorship. So it was mutually beneficial. And then the third benefit that I didn't necessarily plan out, but kind of has happened, is that it drives me to produce more content. So I'm
mhm,
actively now working to develop exclusive content for them, and continue to develop that on the side as I kind of gear up to doing more full courses online to do I guess like classes. I do want to expand to classes at some point because I think that's
mhm,
the natural progression for me. But it with my schedule right now and the way my life is, it takes forever for me to produce content I like. Just the editing alone, takes forever. Scripting it, finding, and
mhm,
I try to absorb a lot of the subject myself before I want to make a course to teach on, especially the fundamentals. Those are the hardest things to really teach. They're the most basic, but like being able to teach them well is like an insane kind of challenge. It's overwhelming. It's like I've done it for so long. It's just
mhm,
intuitive to me. Like I don't need
mm,
to think about it. So I
yeah,
being to for myself, putting the brakes on, full stop, and really trying to break down what I'm doing and why I'm doing that. And okay, then how can I structure that somebody that knows nothing about this, because it's like a language, I have to really break it down to these little itty bitty chunks and make it I had to curate that so that somebody can absorb,
mhm,
and so that's why it's taking a while. So eventually, maybe at some point, like mid next year, I'll actually be at a place where, okay, I finished up this line of material or this courses, and now I can launch like a class with it. So I'm just keeping it now for like the patrons to take, and I'm not putting it like on like a Cube Brush or a Gumroad store, because then I was like, hey, maybe it's not ready for that. Maybe it'll cut into sales. And so I'm just keeping it in one place. Then I can go back and edit it all, I guess, later.
mhm,
So yeah, I don't know. I'm trying a little bit of everything, and I've just kind of planned out 6 YouTube episodes, so I have half of them recorded. The other half, I don't know. They stay in that back burner folder. It gets really tough once I go into term with CGMA, which starts next week. It staying the YouTube, unfortunately, is always the last thing or the
mm,
first thing on the chopping block when it comes to my time. It sucks because the
mhm,
algorithm, you might know that as well. It's like
yeah,
it is tough to like, even at like I'm trying to hit like 85,000 on it subscribe, but like it is a very rocky road. Like my video I posted last week only got like 1,000 views, and it's like that's a very low percentage even for that number. So it's like
mm,
even though I'm trying to produce content actively and consistently as I can, there's just some things that, if YouTube doesn't want people to see your content, unfortunately, they're not going to see it. And, we're kind of at the whim of that. So at the end of the
yeah,
day, you still got to create because you love doing it, not for the views, not for the, not for the fame but it can get frustrating if you do it for the wrong reasons, or if you try to make sense of it, because I don't think anybody can actually make sense of it. You just kind of, it's like putting a ship in a bottle or a message in a bottle, throwing it out and just hoping for the best.
yeah,
So
it's
yeah,
true.
and that's why it's always the first to get cut, in my priority
Mhm,
list, because there's the least amount of consistency
yeah,
there with the returns on the time investment. You can
mhm,
put something on Instagram, I can pretty much know what it's going to do. I can put something on Facebook, almost know what it's going to do. YouTube, it's like pulling a card out of a deck. Like I just don't know what I'm going to get. There's a
yeah,
certain odds. It's going to be a hit or miss. And I noticed, like, at least in the art community, unless you're really good at editing, and if you got a really great personality, my personality is like so average to the bar. I'm not like a world class entertainer.
mhm,
I'm a little bit more down to business, but
mhm,
so with my average personality and my spotty editing at times, I do okay. But like I notice people that if they're painting like interest or Pinterest girls and they're doing portrait art,
mm.
these young people they are lapsing me through the roof. Like that's just 2020. That's where the interest is people drawing
Mm,
portraits and everything like that. So it's like it's okay. It is what it is. But I'm just like that little guy that does the fundamentals and just trying to teach a good lesson, and almost kind of like the Bob
mm.
Ross. But Yeah, we did
Yeah.
unicorns last week, so I've never done a unicorn before, so that was a that was a fun lesson.
Yeah, I saw that video actually. And the paintings you came up with were really pretty, and they gave me such yeah, I don't know if you ever saw that movie Last Unicorn.
Oh yeah, that's
Yeah.
100% why I had to paint those. 'Cause my
It's like
3-year-old daughter found that movie and she watched it like 9 times in 3 days. So like I had to
mhm.
draw some pictures basically based off that movie. Couldn't get the songs out of my head there, but so they're drawing unicorns. Like, oh, this is what things have come to. How do I turn this into an art lesson?
Well, it definitely gave me that feeling. It almost
Good,
felt like stills from the film
good.
almost.
That was the intent. So I'm actually relieved that that's some people might take that the wrong way, but no, that's definitely the vibes I was going for.
So, what's something you wish you'd known about art before you began?
Business. Like
Mm,
business marketing is something I've never been good at, and it's something that as like an entrepreneur, some a creative that's trying to stay out of a 9 to 5 job, you got to
mm,
know business and marketing through and through. Like you could be like an average artist, but if you know how to market and sell yourself, you can do fine. You can do just perfectly fine and well. It's so much of it comes down to how you conduct yourself online, how you build your brand, and I
mm,
wish I was just better at that. I really I'm not, and I'm constantly in a headspace where I'm trying to wrap my head around it. But like I maybe I just need to sit down and shut up and read some books about it, which I always intend to. I have a few, but I never. It's like I got the best intention, and I just drift off. I drift from it. I'm like, okay.
yeah.
So now I'm at a point where hopefully maybe in the next year or so I can actually hire some kind of online marketing or specialist, someone to do that sort
Mm,
of thinking for me. Like I have an accountant because I don't know how to push those numbers to the government the right way to keep me out of jail. So I hire an accountant for it. Well, I need to hire a marketer. So I'm producing all this content and I want to just reach more people.
mm,
So I need some help on that. So knowing your own, what you're capable of, what you're not capable of, and I'm trying not to live in a bubble where I'm like inflating like what I'm actually good at. Like you do, I think a lot of artists and creative people need to know their strengths and their weaknesses and
mhm,
definitely lean into your strengths and get help where you're of course weaker. So you can
mhm.
stay afloat, stay balanced and anchored to, kind of keep that momentum moving forward.
Mm,
But
definitely.
that's definitely what I wish I knew more of.
How do you manage work-life balance?
I know it's I'm gonna post a video somewhere in the next 2 weeks probably about because it's been popular lately. A lot of artists are doing a
Mhm,
day in the life or like this is what my full time artist looks like. But
mhm,
mine is you and me. So many people are gonna see it's complete chaos. So because I have a 2-year-old, I have a 3-year-old. The wife is in as well from maternity leave and
mhm,
COVID. Is
mhm.
messing schedules up left and right.
Yeah.
They're all just above me, and I can't separate family from work and I can't separate work from family. The best people I know in the business are they have keep them very separate, so they either have a space where they can put a lock on the door and remain
Mhm,
uninterrupted, guilt free. Like if I can't get uninterrupted, it's I'm still gonna feel guilty about it. But the best people that and artists can create the best work when they get into a flow state. I have
mhm,
not been able to get into that in a long time, so
mhm,
I'm waiting to get back to that once the kids are a little older. I'm just trying to survive right now because I got one of them in daycare all morning, 5 days a week, but even then
mhm,
they're home all afternoon. So I try to survive from like 12 till about 6:37 when we get them fed and into bed. And then whatever steam is left in my tank, back to creating.
mhm.
Um, but I fizzle out, because the kids will get you up very early. Like it's been
Yeah.
5:30 all week being creative at 7 at night after dealing with that all afternoon
Mm,
is it's honestly so tough so tough to be creative because like you need a really good mental place to kind of get into that where you're like you feel rejuvenated and fresh. You got a little pep in your step and it like after dad being the family guy all afternoon I'm just laying in my chair. I'm like I order energy drinks by the case. I have it all over here and I'm like okay, if I can make it till I'm 40, if I don't die from
mm,
like a heart attack, I'll be having like 3 of these things a day. I
mm.
might be okay. But yeah, right now it's I don't think I balance it because when I'm with my family, I'm thinking
Mhm,
about work, and when I'm working,
mhm,
I'm thinking about them and how I need to go to attend to them, and so it's tough. The teaching kind of helps that I rarely will take freelance work on at this point.
mm,
I some company oversold me on some last week. Like, oh, it's gonna be 3 pieces. You get it done 20 days, it'll be fine. Like, okay.
uh,
And now after like, talking to them, it's turned up to 6 pieces. And my schedule for the class starts next week. So I'm gonna be October, I'm gonna be drowning in
wow,
time. And yeah, so I don't know. I'm figuring that out. I want to hire more help, but
yeah.
hiring help for the kids and getting them into the daycare and stuff. Yeah, it's just tough this year.
Well, it's a good thing the kids are giving you art prompts. Yeah.
Yeah, they are. Next, we're gonna do. I think I'm gonna take. My kid loves dinosaurs. She loves the dinosaurs. Just
Mhm,
anything with sharp teeth. She likes princesses and dinosaurs. So since I don't feel like drawing a princess, I got through the unicorn. I'm gonna get all her dinosaur toys and see if I can
mhm,
do some kind of art lesson and show using her toys, setting them up and doing like a James Gurney style
mhm.
illustration with the dinosaurs. So yeah, they certainly do provide entertainment and inspiration on where to take things.
Yeah. What is your favorite aspect of art?
Oh, I think that's what it is, the
Mhm,
escapism, because
mhm,
I'm stressed out through the roof, trying to be a good dad and everybody for the kids here. So it's
mhm,
like before it was always the video games, when I was younger, before the
mhm.
art, that I just like to go to these RPG worlds and just escape to and stuff. So now it's like, okay, I can do that if I create it myself. And then of course I can tie that into the business side of things
Mm,
and promote the art business and stuff like that, make an art lesson from it. So I just
yeah.
like the escapism side of it.
Mhm.
um it's just there's a little satisfaction in there too, that goes, okay, yeah, that actually worked. But I only think I like maybe three out of maybe half my images, maybe 3 out of 5 on a good week or a good month. There's still like a
Yeah.
lot of work. I think, I don't know, I can't speak for anybody else, but even after doing the art for so many years, there's still like a lot of stuff that I'll put out, and a day later I'm like, you just, maybe I shouldn't have put that online. So I don't know. I've never been able to escape that side of it either.
I'm sure a lot of artists feel that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're not alone.
Good to hear that.
Do you have a least favorite aspect? Anything that frustrates you?
Well, yeah. I guess since making it my business,
Mhm,
it's harder and harder to do it as that escapism that I just talked about,
mhm,
to do it as something carefree and something relaxing. Because now, if I sit down and I'm painting something, 2 seconds later, in my head, I'm like, how do I monetize this? How do I make this
mm,
into a lesson? Like, I feel guilty if I paint something and don't record it at this point.
hmm,
So
yeah,
that I think that's going to go for any genre or any field of work someone employs. Like if someone loves video games and they go and become a streamer, you hear those guys talking about all the time. Like, oh, I played a video game and I didn't go online with that. I feel kind of terrible about that. So
mm,
right there's always things that you got to keep for yourself, and things for work. So yeah, once in a while I'll do a painting where I don't actually record it, and I just try to make
yeah,
it for myself, but not as often as I like. So hopefully once more of the art and the business stuff is more stable, once my schedule can regulate more, then I can get back to doing a little bit more art for myself again.
mhm. I think that's I mean, there's like the sort of professional side of art, but there's also I think a lot of that comes from our sort of culture of monetizing our hobbies in a way, monetizing the things we do for love, and then it becomes like, well, then every time I do this, I should be making money from it,
Yeah,
and
you
it's like,
become a
well,
slave.
no, sometimes you should just enjoy what you're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, that comes back to work life balance, and
Mm,
that's like an ongoing battle. That some days you turn out all right, other weeks it's you get too
mhm.
buried in it.
Yeah. So how do you cope with stress? Um,
Oh, I like
yeah.
to do running,
Hmm.
fitness stuff. If I wasn't like an art coach, I'd probably want to be a physical instructor or therapist,
Hmm.
something like that. I've always, at least since my early 20s, I think when I got serious about art, um, I try to get in some physical activity every day, go for walks with the family, or I've been doing a lot of jogging, pushing the infant in a stroller, or you can see that my big fat back TV. I'll play a retro video game like that.
Hmm.
That's my release right there. It was Saturday night last night. I was up till like way later than I responsibly should have been. Like maybe like
Mhm.
12:30 playing some N64 and stuff like it's on the old carts. I was like, and I was telling my friends like, oh, it feels so good just to plug a physical cartridge into the slot of this machine.
Mm.
You know, I miss that stuff. I don't like the CDs as much, and definitely things with touch screens and phones. Like I don't get that
Yeah.
satisfaction. You know, of almost like clicking a VHS into the old player. You know, it's like
Mm.
it tickles my bones in a good way.
Do you ever get block?
No,
No?
and I know a lot of people do, and I feel bad. I almost feel bad because I didn't. It's just because like I have to structure my time and plan so much of
Mhm.
it out. I have too many ideas that I want to do, too many worlds that I want to create, characters that I want to explore, and offshoot things that mean nothing at all. That again, I have these folders of that. I'd be lucky to get through those, and then I got as I'm painting them, I get more ideas. And so for me, it's just never been enough. I don't have enough time, and I get frustrated as I want to paint them. But there's never a lack of it. There's always
Mhm.
something coming in and going out, and hopefully I can grab something before it goes out. And I act. You know, a lot of people come up with ideas, but very few people actually will actually act on an idea or act on a painting and just put it
True.
down and do so.
Yeah.
I'm at the I never really had that much of a problem. I think a lot of it can come from attitude and drive. Like I'm just
Mhm.
some people, because I see it in the art discourse, they would just come up with excuse after excuse to like not do something or to like, oh, I can't create because of this, this, and this. And that's why, you know, even in the art world themselves, there's a lot of people doing art. There's a much fewer people surviving comfortably off of the art. And it's because it's very
Mhm.
easy to drift into that block and to come up with excuses to not do something. And that's what will separate someone I think that's successful from not is your attitude toward it. Like you gotta just have like a no kind of BS sort of approach to it. Like I'm just gonna sit down, I'm going to get things done. And that's kind of always worked for me. I like it. I've always had that pressure that, okay, I have to perform. So I'm going to try my best to get it done, which is why you know, started to steer more and more away from client work because there is extra pressure
Mhm.
with client work and it's fine and all. But like I'm less stressful if I'm painting an image and I'm producing it for a course or for a class or
Mhm.
for myself. So I try to like, okay, I can't I'm not making a lot of money selling prints or going to conventions or things like that, especially since I work digital. I don't have physical copies of
Mhm.
like paintings and stuff. Maybe someday down the road I can make that happen. But so I can monetize my stuff through lessons and putting them on YouTube and helping other people. So
Mhm.
there's always something new I want to show or to talk about. So it just keeps me going. And the fact that I
Mm.
have to feed my family now keeps me going. Like there is never like an option to not sit down and create. But
It's
unfortunately,
true.
the business side of things takes over. So it's like even throughout my fragmented day, very
Mhm.
little of it and an amazing very little of it actually is just creating, which is unfortunately it's unfortunate. Most of it is it does come to the business side. I got to set up meetings here, organize this, meet with students over here, figure out the class lesson for this day. Am I working on YouTube this week? Okay, what am I going to do? I need 3 days to produce that. And it's always something. So, yeah, I want to find more time to like consolidate a lot of that, create, you know, get back to creating. But I mean, it's always a battle of balancing that stuff out.
That makes sense. Yeah. So obviously we've talked about a lot, but do you have any other advice for people starting out?
Yeah, there's a lot of resources right online.
Mhm.
I think a lot of people try to take the fast track to getting good at art. They see professionals work on ArtStation, Instagram all the time. I don't. I think there's a huge misconception about okay, I need to do this 8 to 12 hours a day every day
Mm.
to improve. I don't think that's true at all. I think if you can actually focus on what you're doing,
Mhm.
break that down to 3 or 4 hours max training per day. It's
Mhm.
better to have focus and very like essentially a carefully laid out plan to improve
Mhm.
rather than so I'll see people again in these art discords that are like I just drew boxes and circles for 2 months. What was I supposed to get out of that? Like people just practice for the sake of practice. They log hours for the sake of or they'll do a study for the sake of studying, right? Like everyone
Mhm.
has seen this. Okay, I did this art study and but you ask them, what were you actually studying? They don't know. You know, you need a plan to improve. You need that structure.
Yeah.
And just logging hours for the sake of hours, you're just probably building bad habits and
Mm.
making that, kind of cementing them into your workflow, and it's going to make it even harder to improve. So, if you focus, find a plan, preferably find an instructor that can, or a good community you trust, to actually get a feedback loop so you can improve, so you don't make a bunch of bad habits early on, like not using
Mhm.
reference, or detailing too much too soon. Like, those are the things you always see too much. So it's doable for anybody. I was always an average artist. I'm an average to poor businessman myself right now, but somehow I'm doing it. And I firmly believe I can do it. Anybody can do it. It
Mm.
just takes a little bit of planning, a little bit of structure, and being real with yourself. Like, not like, because you see people out there, or I've seen enough artists out there that they live in this notion, like, I'm actually really good, I'm doing this, I'm pro. Like, no, you got some huge misconception of that because your mom told you you're really good or something. You got a lot of hard work you still got to put in, which it's still a factor, but
Mhm.
it doesn't have to be like, as much as, there's healthy ways to study, there's efficient ways to
Mhm.
study. And of course, taking classes online to almost kind of get a good feeler of what's out there is, of course, a great thing. Not that I'm
Mhm.
trying to promote anything I'm doing right now, but like, it structure is good. You can get so much free stuff online, but a little bit of guidance, that from another source probably can help fast track things just a little bit.
Mhm.
And I do think it's best to kind of get your artistic training wheels before signing up to anything. Like, it's always a shame if someone does take a class and they've literally never held a pencil before. And I've seen this, and I'm like, what am I
Mhm.
supposed to work with? You, like, you need to get your sea legs. You gotta at least felt water to kind of know what that is wet. So it's
Yeah.
like, go draw. Go log in. Like 100 or so hours of just basic stuff, and not expect it to get delivered to you on a platter, by taking
Mm.
a course. Because anything that an instructor says, regardless of their skill level, is going to go over their head. Because you just
Mhm.
need to draw, or you need to paint, preferably from observation, a certain amount of time before any kind of class is actually relevant to you.
Yeah.
And that people just want to fast track it, everything.
Mm.
They want results quick, but you got to slow down, and you just got to plan things out and have patience.
It's true. That makes sense.
Well, thank you for having me on today. It's been a pleasure.
Mhm. It has. How can people find out more about your work, Tyler?
Um, well, I try to make myself everywhere on the internet. I have YouTube. I don't think I have an official YouTube name. Someone made a comment. They posted in some other art group, like, look, this guy has got this far. He's never even changed his YouTube like title. It's like, YouTube dash, like, I never put a name to it. Apparently I could have.
Mhm.
But I think at this point, if I changed it,
Yeah.
I all the links I have set up on my sites would break because it would change the URL. But if you type my name and then in Google, I should come up on ArtStation and Instagram. I'm on
Yeah.
every platform, and I've never made
Mhm.
an alias for anything. I always just straightforward branding, my name, and then usually art.
Mhm.
There is an
Yeah.
old website that I actually don't use called tyleredlinart.com. I wouldn't go to there. Brush Sauce works. That
Okay.
typing that in, I have two brush sauce sites. I got, for my
Mhm.
main work, Brush Sauce Academy for anything educational.
Mhm.
But that would be about it. But yeah,
Yeah. We'll have links to a
thank you.
lot of stuff for you in the description below. And yeah.
Thank you very
So
much.
thank you for coming. Thank you everybody for watching. This has been
Thank you
Everyday
guys.
Expertise.
Thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed this interview. Be sure to share this video with friends and colleagues who may also enjoy this topic. Let us know your thoughts by leaving a comment below or check the description for our social media. See you next time.